Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. Today, we're tackling the subject, transforming the contact center customer experience through an empowered agent experience. Joining me today are Boris Grinchman, LiveVox GM of CRM and Messaging, and guest speaker, Art Schoeller, who's Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester. And for those of you who don't know Art, he has significant experience and expertise in the CCaaS space. Gentlemen, thank you for joining today. So Art, we have a lot of good stuff to dig into, but before we do, I think it's fair to say the last 12 months have been really interesting. So if you could, please share with us some of the macro trends that you're seeing.
So, there's some of this in my charts in the deck here as far as the impact, but yeah, I'm getting tired of using the word unprecedented. We know, everybody knows, every consumer on the face of the planet, well, almost everyone knows that something big happened and continues to happen. And so it's had a significant impact on businesses, on governments, on consumers, on families. And yes, unfortunately, we've lost friends and family in the midst of this pandemic. But at the same time, customer service continues to be a need. And for all the years I've been in the industry, I've seen all sorts of different technologies positioned all sorts of different ways, but I've been pretty adamant to go back to, well, wait a minute, what does it do for the agent, okay? Because they're the ones who are ultimately responsible, accountable, and the ones who actually hold in their hands the customer experience when the customer finds their way to the contact center. And so as we've looked at automating so that we can cut costs, yeah, but we should still satisfy customers, what's been transforming literally over a much longer period of time, going back to IVRs in the 80s, websites in the 90s, mobile apps in the new millennia, and bots, all right? Well, guess what? When any of those self-service options run out of gas, we end up with an agent. And if there's one thing that's really consistent that I hear when I speak to contact center leaders, and I ask them this question, what's one of your biggest challenges? And that is retaining great agents. Because what's happened now is, look at these bullet points here. As we've pulled off the easy stuff, they're getting the tough stuff. They need to be consultants. They need to be advisors. They need to show empathy. And if we're squeezing them too hard, they really lose that energy to be able to deliver on the brand promise in that moment, that magic moment of interaction with a customer. So next chart, let's take a look specifically though at the impact of the pandemic on customer service and contact center leaders. So in the midst of the pandemic, we broke this out by a number of industries. We saw many industries where volumes went up by dramatic amounts. Now others, granted, like for example, airline and travel, once we got through the initial phase of cancellations, rebookings, and questions about COVID-19 on flights, well, we know what happened with the airline business and the hotel business. We went through the floor. So, there's these wild swings in traffic volumes and wild swings in terms of agent availability. Because guess what, for many organizations, and I really applaud the workforce managers that are out there, because you are the unsung heroes of this pandemic, needing to match this traffic with this wild swings in availability of agents, because, okay, in 48 hours, y'all got to go home. Well, how do we do that? How do we get everybody spun up with all the right technology? And the thing that happened from the demand side is more and more interactions that required empathy. I mean, if we look at banking over here, I don't want to drain everyone on this chart, but loans, mortgage assistance, payment assistance, financial counseling, there were tons of people out of work. And who did you have to go to in the United States here for your PPP loan or for your compensation? You had to go to your bank. So it was really, I need to renegotiate my mortgage because I'm out of work. I don't want to be evicted. I'm confident I'll get my job back at some point, but all of these areas, government, retail, insurance, saw these increased demand for customer service with an agent. An agent who could show empathy, who could solve problems, could look at things a different way than just what a bot would. Now, granted, in this time frame, a lot of people pushed a bunch of bots out there and did successfully automate some customer interactions. But at the end of the day, there was just a lot of pressure on our contact centers and our contact center agents. Next chart, please. So if we look at this from the perspective of all the various touch points that are out there, we talk about customer journeys from the website, from the mobile app, from the chat bot, and then at some point finding its way to an agent. During this time frame, we exposed what I call the leaky boat of business processes. If there was a business process that had some problems with it, well, the pandemic literally pumped a bunch of water through that small hole in the hull and exploded it into a real sinking ship. I will tell you, I'm not picking on retail necessarily, but one big thing in retail has been the shift from bricks and mortar stores to online e-commerce. Now, combining that experience in a hybrid way for both bricks and mortar and e-commerce meant that we had to combine those processes and those organizations. If I buy it online and say I want to have it shipped to the store, well, those things ought to work together well. The notifications ought to work right. Well, I've spoken with many customers in retail where those processes were kind of the leaky boat that were a bit broken, didn't quite work right, and created more customer demand for where's my product? I asked for it to be shipped. It isn't there, or I haven't been notified, or when do I go there, or is the store safe? So this, as I say, leaky boat in customer journeys, where are these hot spots, more so than we've seen in the past, has really raised the bar on emphasizing getting the right data so we could look at these customer journeys. Next chart, please. Now that, of course, is a challenge for everybody. We want to enable customer experience and design teams who can bring to the table design thinking for these customer journeys and all these different touch points and all these hotspots and say, how do we improve things? Well, when we at Forrester have surveyed these design teams, what's the top thing that you're working on? Journey mapping, designing user experiences, user experience strategy and design. Well, this is not an easy thing to do if you can't get to the data, if you don't know what's going on. And if we look at the key drivers in the Forrester Customer Experience Index, which is our index that rates and ranks a number of brands based on consumer surveys, what are the top 3 things they're looking for, which was actually on my prior chart? People want customer service reps who can answer their questions, all of them. They can resolve customer questions quickly. No one has time. And that they've got the authority. They don't have to go check with someone, so we can ring the first contact resolution bell and make sure that we're one and done. These are the 3 key drivers. So are we set up in such a way that our contact centers, the data system supporting them, the system supporting the agent experience as well, enable all of this? Next chart, please. So as we pulled together with LiveVox a collaborative study, we really took a deeper look at bringing a number of different systems together to really enhance organizations' abilities to attack these problems. Nick, did you want to comment here, please?
Yeah, so certainly I think it's fair to say that CX, customer experience, is somewhat the holy grail now. We're in a place where product and pricing are more and more at parity. So customer service can be a major point of differentiation or not. And so, one of the long-standing beliefs at LiveVox is that if you focus on creating an exceptional agent experience, that can have a huge impact on creating an exceptional customer experience, sort of an AX equals CX. So we wanted, as you mentioned, to understand more about that dynamic from the perspective of contact center leaders. So we commissioned Forrester to do a study on this very topic. And I think, Art, the results are really interesting. So I'm going to turn it back to you to share that.
So again, in this collaborative effort, let's go find something out. All right, what are the key questions and who are we going to talk to? So this chart here largely talks about the demographics of our survey respondents. by title, by number of seats. We got a good distribution there. By position, IT versus operations. We also got some good samples. Granted, we got more in financial services here, but we got some good samples from healthcare, insurance, and telecommunications as well. But we were really interested in asking organizations about their agent desktop and their contact center as a service set of capabilities. These a lot of times are not together. And I pause carefully and choose my words carefully there that, you know, we need all of these to sing in concert to make for a great experience, but, you know, there's times they just aren't. So we're going to go into some of the data here. Next chart, please, to show what we found when we went out into the marketplace. So first of all, customer and agent experiences fall short. I don't know if this is a surprise. There's always an opportunity to improve. If we set a high bar in terms of expectations, there's always going to be this continual improvement process, which I encourage people to do. Never stop. Always look to improve because your competitors will. And not only that, consumer expectations will rise as well. Next chart, please. So if we look at this, first of all, let's take a step back and all right, this is the omni-channel, multi-channel, whatever channel kind of question. You know, many surveys look at what type of touch points are used to provide customer service. And whoa, email came out as the resounding winner here. So we're not asking volume in this question. It's very important. Which of the following channels does your contact center support today? So we found that 82% of the organizations surveyed offer email, and then voice, and then chat. This is so consistent with channel or touchpoint surveys I've seen in the past, where you typically have email and voice duking it out as number one and number two. Chat is certainly something that got a boost during the pandemic, this sort of what I called forced digital experience. And we see messaging apps on the rise as well. Another sleeper here, though, showing up at 52%, is this sort of utility player that is SMS. I mean, the great thing about SMS is that it's pretty ubiquitous and it's pretty accessible by everybody. And I think during the pandemic, a lot of people found that out and said, whoa, wait a minute, if I need to reach my customers, I can send or I can receive a text message. In fact, in some instances, a bit of an interactive session over SMS. So it was sort of this sleeper that, you know, more and more people were forced to say, what can I implement quickly? Gee, text messaging is already there. I don't have to jump through a lot of hoops for some of these other types of capabilities. Next chart, please. So as we set that as a foundation, one of the key things from a customer experience perspective is, you know, my big rule is, you know, serve your customers on their channel of choice. When I speak a number of times with customers of Forrester who want to talk about channel strategy and they want to force customers to a lower cost channel, quite honestly, I throw down the penalty flag. It's like, that's your own point of view. That is efficiency driven. That is not customer experience driven. Again, that's a little bit of my soapbox on that, but really, how do you do that? And so the limitations that people run into, we ask them, well, what holds you back from doing that? Well, are there specific capabilities in a certain channel that would be advantageous? 57% said, can't take advantage of it. Integrating the channels with our other systems is a challenge. Inability to access pre-approved content that I'd like to use in that channel in the form for that channel for my customers. Now, again, I don't want to drain everyone here, but we see that organizations clearly going all the way from a low of 36% here up to 57%, we're saying, I have problems when I really want to open up the right channel for the right customer based on their choice. Next chart, please. So that's sort of the channel story, but how do we manage the channels? And so our question here is, can you really define those flows easily and readily? Now, granted, a high percentage said we can orchestrate across all channels, but certainly 38% said, we can only orchestrate within individual channels, sort of the multi-channel versus omni-channel type of approach. So I know from speaking with Forrester customers, this continues to be a challenge in that it's not just the bot on the front end of that channel, it's all the things necessary to connect that customer ultimately to the right agent is all part of that orchestration. Next chart, please. So some of this comes from, in fact, a large percentage of this comes from integrations, and they really can prevent a roadblock to making for a great agent experience and a great customer experience. Next chart, please. Whoa, wait a minute. We got a resounding pain point here. We really tapped into it. We asked folks, what challenges do you have with your CRM systems? What challenges do you have with your contact center systems? What challenge do you have putting the two of them together in terms of integrations? And we've got 3/4, 75, 76, 77% coming back saying mildly to very challenging. And if we can't connect the dots between the system of engagement that is our CRM system and the system that is connecting agents to customers, I think we got a problem here. And so this was, when you put a survey out, you wonder what kind of answers you're going to get back. I was actually kind of surprised these numbers were so high because there's been so many, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, so what are the integration challenges in your mind? And Boris, I could ask you the same. What's driving those friction points?
Some of them come from the fact that these are disparate systems. It's a multi-cloud type of solution, or it might be one of those systems is still on premises. We've got data that needs to be mashed together between the two of them. That's a technical term, mashing data, right? But I need the CRM data and I need the contact center operational data that tells me about agents and operations performance, and also really more of that customer data that typically is over in the CRM system. That's how we really do our job more effectively when we pull those together. And if it's hard to join that data, it makes for a problem. But Boris, you have a comment here?
Yeah, I think your comments, Art, specifically are spot on. When we look at CRM systems today, kind of have to look at the core function of what they used to provide, or what they still provide to organizations today. A lot of them are systems of record that are really designed, whether it's for order management, financial services, transactions, or for really sort of business ERP system perspectives. They aren't really well designed to be communicative in nature. And when you're trying to really sort of glue this communication engine, which is your contact center platform, to something that was never designed for that, the results kind of get either hard or complicated, or just simply don't really go together. And you couple that onto the fact that a lot of folks have really sort of utilized channel strategy or channel communication strategy as just a layer. In other words, we've always had voice, we've had voice for a very long time, and you stitch on messaging capabilities, you start to really sort of expound the problem even more so, where you're just layering on bits and pieces and never just quite fits and goes together.
Well, Boris, some great points here. I think that's going to bear out when we get to some of the additional data here. So next chart, please. Let's go for it. So these integration challenges, first of all, one of the things that I mentioned here is being able to look at the customer's journey. Can I capture what I call, and I've been using this term for years, the breadcrumbs that customers drop along the way? I mean, often I've heard people say that, well, we've got the systems of engagement that capture what customers did. And it's like, well, did that really capture when they were kind of wandering around on the website, or they interacted with us over here or over there? It's a lot of times not the full story. And just one of the top ones that we found that customers were concerned about was, well, wait a minute, we don't know who the customer, well, it's not that we don't know who the customer is. There's all sorts of different ways that we know who the customer is. An email, it's an email address. On a phone call, it could be their cell phone and their caller ID. And I could go on across all the messaging apps and social media. All those tokens of identity are all different. And how do we really weave all that together to really understand, wow, it's Art messaging us, and Art's got an outstanding order. So that's just one of the items here, and I'll let people take a look at the rest of the ones that are here that really are kind of a challenge in terms of capturing and making use of the journey data that is a little bit spread around or just not there. Next chart, please. So shifting from that journey data, which is really critically important from a CX perspective, the thing that's really important for agents, and I did my soapbox speech earlier about agents. Well, the Alt-Tab key on a keyboard is something that is the most frequently used by agents because they are hopping around from this app to that app, from this app to that app to get their job done. It's a challenge. And I was actually kind of surprised by these research results because when we asked people, well, how many apps do you have on the agent desktop? I've heard more times the more than 10, which only came in at 5% here, all right? But we saw people that 7 to 10 or 4 to 6 different applications, and I get it. Everyone's trying to put another thing out there to help the agent, and it's not. So it's just adding to the confusion. So at the end of the day, this idea of crafting a great agent experience, so much of it pivots around having a great agent desktop. Next chart, please. The other thing too is that from the standpoint of we have to always think about the IT experience as well. That, my goodness, we asked folks how many IT people are out there supporting your contact center, and wow, 16. You know, more than the third of the firms had 16 people to support the contact center. And this is always a pain point because contact center leaders, although I don't know if it's any different than any other business group or any other line of business, we just can't get enough from IT. You know, IT is always on the receiving end of there just isn't enough out there. But here for contact centers, you hear many times that contact center leaders want to take over and they want to run the systems themselves. Well, sometimes that's a little bit of beware of what you ask for, but you know, it is a pain point and it is a concern. Next chart, please. So when we look at this issue of the agent desktop, now I'm not suggesting that the nirvana is the single pane of glass, single app, does it all. Even when we do that, we still expose other apps and other capabilities through a framework or whatever to really make for a good agent experience. But there are times when an agent is cutting and pasting or moving from one screen to another that's very predictable. It's a workflow. And so if we could put in place on the agent desktop a number of key workflows to handle their interactions and save them another 10 seconds or so, or 15 seconds, or just make it easier and more accurate when they're kind of cutting and pasting from one screen to another, we had a pretty good percentage of organizations that said they can't really implement this kind of capability on their agent desktop. Next chart, please. So finally, you know, when it all comes down to it, we've talked about the desktop, the agent, the customer experience, multi-channel. We also really need to understand beyond customer journeys, are we hitting our marks? So performance analysis and performance against KPIs and the ability to understand truly, well, why did we miss it? What's the root cause? Well, you know, it's like there's still some issues out there as far as being able to do that. Next chart, please. So one way of measuring performance is certainly our own KPIs, average handle time, first call resolution. Some of these have more impact on customer experience and their ratings of customer satisfaction. You know, if a call is taking too long, if I can't resolve it on the first call. But it really is when we ask folks, first of all, what do you use to assess customer satisfaction? They rated strongly, not just CSAT and NPS surveys, but their own KPIs. They trusted those to really be indicators of customer satisfaction. And as we've seen a dramatic growth in the last few years in the ability to do speech and text analytics, it's another good source to assess, where the heck are the customers at? Next chart, please. But can everybody get there? I spent 4 years of my life managing a call center reporting package that was very popular and still is today. And there always is this lag in being able to tie the actual performance of my center and the actual performance of my agents. And so when we look at some of these critical performance metrics, there's not a lot of organizations that are taking advantage of them. We see, as I go down, I mentioned on the prior chart, speech and text analytics. It's only about half penetrated in the marketplace. It's mature enough now that it really should be out there across the board. And KPIs still seem to be a challenge for everybody, that less than half are really effectively able to not just report on them. The fact that we asked about analytics here is the ability to analyze the KPIs and see, why did we not meet it on the mark the other day? So there's this, I need to manage the machine of the contact center, this knowledge factory, and I have a gap in terms of being able to do that. Next chart, please. So we tested and wanted to find out what was the market feedback on being able to have a system where both my CRM and my contact center are delivered as, in essence, a unified service. Would it have an impact on agent? Would it have an impact on customer experience? Next chart, please. So from a purchase perspective, now granted, we need to synchronize. At one point in time, we're doing a CRM move and also a contact center move, but generally there is a need to have some sort of compelling event, that it's a major upgrade or a major change. We finally do want to deploy CRM on the agent desktops, but we found that there was a very high likelihood, if budget wasn't an issue, but buying a CRM system that integrates with a contact center system, there'd be a very high likelihood of customers that would want to do that, 69%. So this is pretty high. The recognition that tying these two together is going to have some good capabilities and advantages for their organizations. Next chart, please. And so when we drilled down into that and we asked folks, how does this really work out? What are the top benefits? So improved customer experience, agent experience. And so we asked in sort of bands of preference here, what are the top ones? It really works out quite a bit that improved customer experience highly, and it will also meet it more at an expectation level, that across the board, this easier configuration, reduced cost of solution, but it was CX and agent experience that came out on top. Next chart, please. And
so really good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing it. This is certainly really interesting data. So Boris, I'm going to ask you to take these findings that I've shared and relate them back to the LiveVox platform. But before we do that, please give everybody a 50,000-foot view of who LiveVox is.
Yeah, for folks who may not be familiar with LiveVox, LiveVox is a leading contact center platform in the space. We've been around for about 20 years, and we really specialize in bringing 3 core capabilities in one suite solution to our contact centers today, and that is our CRM, WFO, as well as our omnichannel and AI capability. We handle over 14 billion interactions across sort of that omnichannel landscape today. So that's a little bit about us, Nick.
Great. So Boris, from a product perspective, please walk us through how having purpose-built embedded CRM that LiveVox has, how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first, what really is at the core of the platform and how it really works is that it really helps our clients create sort of this unified profile, if you will, of the consumer or of the organization. And it helps to bring that together. Art, earlier in the conversation, mentioned the fact that there are sort of these different indices that are utilized within different channels, whether that's an email address or a phone number. And the CRM platform really for us helps to unify that. And it does that so that way all of the conversations across all of these channels are coming together in one single picture that are visible to the agent, that are visible to the management staff, and really can visually display and show somebody's, if you will, customer journey over a period of time or over a period of conversations. So that's sort of the first and foremost capability. I think the second capability is really optimizing really the visual experience for the agent by providing all of the right data sets to them. I talked about the conversations, but also in terms of just actually the right data or the right integration to other third-party platforms. So it's all in one place. And back to Art's point, it helps clients reduce times, or it helps agents reduce times in terms of what it takes for them to find the information.
So Boris, there's certainly formidable CRMs out there. There's obviously formidable contact center providers as well that have created integrations kind of out of the box. So why is having a purpose-built embedded CRM so advantageous?
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, Nick, we see a lot of really great companies that had a great start, and their great start was really building around processes. They've invested a lot of time regarding sort of processes that take a long time to mature, and in the word CRM, they've sort of relied on the fact that, or I should say, they purposely built it to have a lengthy sort of customer relationship management life cycle sort of event built in. We actually saw a greenfield in the market space today, and that greenfield was to have something that's very specific to the contact center employee. An employee that needs to react very, very quickly to every single conversation that's coming in, that perhaps doesn't have time to build a long relationship. This may be the first and the last time they're speaking to that employee. And they need to make decisions very, very quickly. And we want to design something that was there for them, that was really sort of conversational based. But the other thing that we saw from an evolutionary standpoint was, as clients or as folks are adopting AI services in the virtual agent or the chatbot capability side, we saw that it was very, very imperative that data resided what I would call within channel, that you could identify the consumer in channel consistently across all channels, that you have the right sets of rules, intents, and logic to apply that. So that way, it really sort of, I'll call it future prepared a lot of clients in the contact center space to really deploy AI capabilities.
So Boris, I want to go back to something you said. You know, as companies built over time, a lot of them had early on legacy third-party platforms, maybe even a CRM, that are important to their operations. Does this mean you have to replace those systems, or how does that work?
Yeah, so our stance on this really wasn't to replace a particular system. Certainly systems of record or purpose-built systems are systems that should continue to stay in place and serve their role within an organization. We actually view this as sort of an aggregation tool, bringing in the key components or key data components out of those systems that are just really important to the contact center employee, and really, being able to pump in the necessary communication functions or outcomes back into those particular systems, whether that's an enterprise level CRM or whether that's a system of record you've had for years.
Got it. And I want to touch on something else you said. You brought up AI, and Art, I'm going to direct this to you. When you think about having an embedded CRM, and obviously one of the key benefits of that is centralized data, how does that affect the ability to implement AI, but for self-service as an example?
So, I will be accused of oversimplifying here, but the phrase that I use is good data, good bot, bad data, bad bot, okay? And we talk about AI in terms of bots all the time, but there's certainly sometimes embedded AI inside of applications that help us do things and we don't even know it's there. But the thing that really is critically important to build all of these types of AI applications, use cases, or embedding them in applications is sifting and sorting through the data and having it available to really, as I say, feed the machine. Without it, it becomes a much bigger challenge. It becomes a much bigger challenge as you put a AI into operation to continue to tune it and make sure it's performing well. So this data cleansing, data organizing, what do we hear about when we hear about AI? The data scientists, okay? Why does this need to be a science project? Well, some of the vendors have made it that way. So, but if you really kind of better organize and take that one off the table, you might not need as many scientists.
So Boris, from a product perspective, when you think about, everybody's trying to figure out how to get started with AI, or as we like to think about it, practical AI. How important is it to, from your perspective, from your seat, in starting with that foundation of centralized data, from the customer perspective across channels, et cetera?
I think it's critical. I think this is going to be your function no matter which route you choose, because I think the technology has come such a long way that creating virtual assistants or bots has actually become fairly simple. But what makes it very hard is for the bot to actually have a fairly personal conversation with the consumer, for it actually to make sense, and for it to deliver sort of what I would call the next level of services. And inevitably, everybody wants it to be the next level service. I'll give you a simple example. Everybody wants the bot to authenticate a consumer when they come in, or to recognize a consumer right away if it's if it's sort of behind a secure site. Well, that point that everybody wants to do becomes incredibly difficult if you're having to dip into the 3 different platforms to grab data from all of those different sets. So I would say this is sort of goal number 1 for folks, is to get all that data into at least one centralized location.
So Boris, one other quick question, then I want to start turning we're starting to see some terrific questions come in from the folks joining us today. Real quickly, just a fast overview. What's so special about the agent desktop experience? Kind of part A and part B. How customizable is it? And what kind of IT resources are needed to code it? But let's keep it quick. So I'm seeing questions pour in here, so I want to get to this.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we realized as well early on is that the contact center space is sort of nuanced. You actually, within the contact center itself, you have multiple different functions. You have a care function, you have a back office function, you may have a sales function, you may have a collections function, and there are different sort of needs in terms of how those folks are utilizing what's in front of them, or their agent desktop. And so we've made the entire experience very, very configurable with a drag and drop GUI that essentially allows people to customize that specific for the needs of their agents, and then also to optimize that experience without necessarily having to go and hire multiple UI front-end developers and engaging in a lengthy custom development project. So that was our sort of our goal number 1, is how do we make it great out of the box? How do we make it easy to configure? And how do we provide it in an environment where if you can create a PowerPoint, you can create an agent desktop? That was sort of our goals that we were going after. So hopefully that answers your question on that particular topic, Nick.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is basically ease of implementation, ease of adoption, and ease of optimization with the platform. So good stuff. So really quickly, if we could go to the next slide, and again, Boris, I'll ask you to be brief as always, because there's terrific questions I want to get to, but I think it's helpful to say, great in theory, how does this work with a customer?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the folks at American First Finance have done a tremendous job with this. They knew they had a challenge because they were looking to optimize all of the conversations across many different channels, again, many different entities, and they had a care team, they had a underwriting team, an onboarding team, and they needed to bring not only the teams together, not only the agent experiences together, but also the customer conversations together in one. And so they've done a tremendous job of really creating a unified desktop through our CRM platform to really optimize the conversations and to draw closer in a quicker amount of time during the conversations their contact center agents were having with customers.
Great, terrific summary. So I want to turn to some of the questions that the folks joining us have today. So please, I encourage you to ask questions, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. So I'll ask the first one here, and I'll throw this one to you first, Art. Do you think some of the data analysis challenges that people have stem from not having enough data, or not knowing what to do with the data, or connecting the data they have?
Oh boy, I think it's a combination of all of the above. You know, we are, like in many business applications, we are indeed awash in data. There's tons of it. So sorting through it is always a challenge to see what's in there. At the same time, I said earlier, we've got these breadcrumbs that a number of times it's like, well, but wait a minute, we don't have that and we don't have that. And those are the key items that would help us link together the customer journey. So it's both the complexity of the disparate and many different data systems that we have that have a lot of data, then the missing data, and then joining it all together to make sense of it. So I think it's a triple whammy here, Nick. It's not just either or.
Do y'all of the above?
Yeah.
Great. So here's another. Boris, I'll turn this to you. The 75% survey that are referred to regarding the difficulty of integrating CRM and contact centers is interesting. It seems like the integration talking point has been for vendors has been around for 10 plus years, and yet the issue is still prevalent. What did prior vendors do incorrectly?
That's interesting. An interesting point. I think a couple of different things. I think first of all, I think people took the use cases that were fairly simple early on, which was, hey, let me just optimize, let me just kind of do maybe like a screen pop, or let me get the person to the right page. And that certainly has value, creates efficiency, creates better conversations. But then when we start to think a little bit about, well, as that conversation is sort of coming in from multiple channels, what is the CRM doing? Is the CRM doing something else? Is it doing something differently? When I'm authenticating, or my let's say chat representative is authenticating somebody, are they authenticating it in the same way with the same data set, or are they using something completely different? I don't think anybody really bet on this notion that we were going to go through, I don't want to call it channel explosion, that gets overused these days, but I don't think anybody was making a particular bet that we were going to grow channels. I don't think anybody was also going to make a bet that we're going to really need intelligent data within the channel itself. Everybody said, well, this is a CRM and this is going to be this box, and nothing really is going to touch it, if you will, that's conversational in nature other than an employee, and that's no longer the case.
Yeah. Got it. Good stuff, Art. I'll turn this to you. It's a quick and easy one. How does this help the overall customer journey?
So, I'll go back to that visual that I had early on in my presentation where there were the hotspots. And so being able to have the information, and ultimately as we start to apply AI in many other places, that, have the AI start crawling the journey data to really understand and tell us where the hotspots are instead of us going to look for them. But anytime we can improve customer journeys, we are absolutely going to improve customer satisfaction and net promoter score. We often refer to it at Forrester as a frictionless experience with our customers. And we know that that word frictionless is an incredible challenge to achieve.
Yep, for sure. So a question for both of you. How have you seen IT staff member roles change when they no longer have to focus all their time and attention supporting the contact center?
Yeah, I can start off with that. So I think there's been a tremendous amount of pressure on IT staff as a whole. We've asked them to focus on on many different things. But where we see their role really elevating now to the next level, where before they were at times burdened with administrator level tasks, creating users, administrating users, creating some things. We're seeing these roles get pushed down into the business more and more so, and we're seeing the IT staff really elevated, where they're really focusing on optimization exercises. They're, of course, focused on large moves to the cloud of a lot of their infrastructure, and where they're starting to utilize AI applications really in a tuning exercise and a holistic exercise to sort of look at their business versus the administrative functions that they used to execute on before. I don't know what you've seen.
So this is one thing, Nick, is that IT teams, and have they needed to change their skill sets? Granted, the classic one is the move to the cloud. So all the infrastructure server jockeys are kind of like threatened in terms of their jobs. But let's talk about contact center here. Going back to my chart about design teams and looking at customer journeys, and as Boris was talking about, being able to address more of the consultative and optimization type questions by using the systems instead of just keeping the systems running. Okay, I mean, you think about going back to on-premises systems between CRM and contact center, we'd have 15 different applications that had all these special integration points of pain. And to upgrade one would have a ripple effect where you'd have to do, 4 months of regression testing, okay? So that goes away. And now that kind of role that does that kind of work may indeed have to shift their skill set to look at more of the use case, the analysis, the consultative type of questions, and support the contact center. Now, of course, the contact centers say they want to do it all themselves. Well, some of this stuff still may take a technical person or two to kind of boost and assist them and work on it. But it's a shift in role. I think it's a great role in terms of pointing technical people at really transforming the customer experience for their companies.
Good stuff, and we'll do another question or so here, and we'll start to wrap things up. So Boris, for you, how is LiveVox architected to see and capture the key data across channels and make that data useful to agents and supervisors?
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to the original question, I think one of the things that we do really well is we really help to create a unified index structure across the platform. And whenever there is a conversation that is occurring in any channel, we're essentially gluing that to a particular customer profile very consistently. Today, we're showing that to the agent, but what we're also doing at the same time is there are a number of business intelligence tools that are actually feeding this data and showing really the pathways that a consumer goes through and the insight that is happening within every single channel. It can actually show sort of not only the movement of the customer, but the propensity for the customer with certain attributes to execute on certain things or not to execute on certain things.
Great, thanks. So, gentlemen, we're starting to run low on time, so if we can go to the next slide. Art, what recommendations do you have for folks who are looking to evolve their AX and or CX strategies?
So some of this may sound a little bit like mom and apple pie, but let me go through it. The first one here is, there's a great quote from Yogi Berra. I think it's from Yogi Berra that says, if you don't know where you're going, you're bound to get there, okay? So this assessing your current state of people, process, and technology from a CX perspective and an EX perspective. And, we talked about the IT staff here. There's that management experience portion of it as well. So just kind of know where you are right now. The other thing too, as I said earlier, in order to invest and go to new technology, you kind of need that compelling event of an old system that's creating some pain because the upgrade costs are so massive. Another thing that helps the business case though is what are those use cases and capabilities that will really improve the customer experience and the agent experience. Doing some of that during the discovery process, especially with a mindset, if you have the best that you can get on customer journey data and where you can really target those improvements. Now, granted, when we look at it from an agent experience perspective, we're always looking to reduce handle time, reduce agent staff. Fine, okay, go make that case, and yeah, you can take that one to the CFO. This leads to the third recommendation here, and this is one that I always find interesting, that, you know, it's a best practice, but I don't want to chastise Forrester customers when they don't. So many times when you're moving a contact center onto a whole nother set of technology, you just want it to still work the same way when you come in on Monday morning. So there is this lift and shift, okay? But are there opportunities in the midst of that? Oh, well, we'll transform once we're done. Well, there might be a few of these that you could pull off in the midst of that migration that would be very beneficial and would help reinforce the case that you made to actually move. And the last one is another Forrester best practice. You're never done. The real best practice customer service organizations that we work with have continuous improvement teams. They have a whole roadmap of journey hotspots, agent desktops that need a bit of improvement. They're always looking to have a roadmap, not one project that everybody piles on. We go fix something and then we disband. And it's like, no. You're always, because your competitors are always going to be wanting to do one leg up on you, but always be looking to improve and put a continuous improvement team in place.
Great recommendations. Thanks for sharing those, Art. So I want to make sure that we wrap up today on a timely basis. So for joining us today, we have a number of assets that are related to today's topic that we're going to be sending to each of you over the next couple of days. So please watch your email for that. And certainly glad to respond to any questions you might have after the webinar today. Art, I want to thank you again for joining us. Boris, for all of your input today. And I want to thank all of you for investing your time and joining us today as well. Have a terrific day, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.